we've already unpacked the system cabinet. So we're only going to be unpacking the I/O cabinet just to save time here. So we'll roll the pallet jack away. Should be able to bring it in off the truck on a normal pallet jack. Now, first thing you have to do is cut the banding straps around the crate. Okay. Now, we do recommend in the procedures that you wear safety glasses when you do this. We don't have steel banding around this, but I believe it will be shipped with steel banding. So the first thing you want to do is cut the horizontal banding straps around the crate. And you want to keep a hand on the shipping ramp, or the unloading ramp right here. So cut the two horizontal straps. Take the ramp down. What's our next step there, Chris?
Okay, next step in the procedure is cut the vertical straps.
Okay. He's back on. Okay.
Okay. Remove the two retaining bolts that secure the retaining block to the shipping crate.
Okay, here's your retaining block right here in the front of the crate. You want to take these two bolts off. We just have it finger tight again to save time, but take that block out, set it aside.
Okay, insert the bolts in the holes in the ramp here.
There are two holes right here in the front of the ramp. You want to stick the bolts through them. You don't have to tighten them in. You just want to press them down in there to hold the ramp in place.
Okay, next step is remove the cardboard.
Okay, so we'll take the top off the shipping crate here. And next we'll remove the cardboard side panels. And after that we'll remove the two inner panels. Next, you're going to have to remove the 4 carriage bolts that are holding the mainframe to the pallet. And there's one at all 4 corners. So you're just going to have to get up under here and unbolt them. And there's 4 carriage bolts, look like this. Again, we're cheating a little bit here.
Okay, slide out the inside retaining bar.
Here's the inside retaining bar right here. This just slides right up.
Okay, make sure the cabinet stabilizers are raised completely.
Okay? So you check all 4 corners, make sure all the stabilizers are up.
Okay.
And everything looks good. We should be able to roll the system off the ramp now.
That's the next step.
So I think you need a minimum of 2 people to do this. These cabinets aren't real heavy, but I still wouldn't recommend doing this with a single person. Okay, one thing I want to point out here is this is a two-cabinet system. The first I/O cabinet always goes on to the left, into the leftmost position here, as you're looking at it from the front. If you had multiple cabinets, the arrangement changes a little bit. But basically, for this system, the system cabinet's going to go here on the right. The I/O cabinet's going to be on the left. If you had a second I/O cabinet, that second I/O cabinet would go over on the right-hand side of the system cabinet. And you just keep alternating back and forth. You can have a maximum of 4 I/O cabinets on the J90 system. Now we're going to take the ESD bag off. And you want to get these cabinets positioned pretty closely to where they're going to be. You want to leave about a foot of space in between the two cabinets so that you can do the inter-cabinet cabling. So now we're going to roll the system cabinet into place. Before we put them together here, if you can see, right here on the edge of the I/O cabinet, there's 4 tabs. One right here, 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 and here. That's where you're going to join the two cabinets together. So the first thing you have to do is slide the cabinets together kind of in a V shape at the front, so those tabs hook over. And I'll do that right now. There, now the tabs are hooked over the lip of the system cabinet there, and we're still going to leave about a foot of space in between the two cabinets so that we can get at the inter-cabinet cabling. So what's our next step, Chris?
Next step is to cut tie wraps that secure the power cables.
Okay, we'll grab a pair of side cutters here. So we've got the power cable strapped up inside of here. I'm going to open up the rear cabinet doors. You need a hex driver to open up these cabinet doors here. And I should mention that we're installing 9004 here. 9004 is a beta system. There are some minor differences between this system and a production system. We'll be pointing those out as we go along. One of the differences here is that on this system, the hinges are on the opposite side from where they would actually be on a production system. I'm going to cut the power cable. Reach around and grab that, Chris. And we also have a power sense cable that's also strapped up here on the side. That's going to run in between the two cabinets. And there's also a remote alarm cable. What next?
Okay. Next step is to remove the AC power module from the rear of the mainframe.
Thank you. Open up the back door on this too. Now also on the production systems, there will be a grounding plug on the back here. This beta system doesn't have one. I'll just clip to the chassis. Your AC power module is right down here. As Chris said, we're going to be removing it. We're just going to take off these 4 Phillips screws at the corners. And we're going to slide it on out. Whole assembly is pretty light. And it's basically being held in with a twist lock here on the end. You want to take the twist lock off and then lay the power module on its front.
Okay. Route the CCU signal cable from the open side of the I/O cabinet into the open side of the mainframe cabinet.
Okay, here's your CCU cable right here. This is a sense cable that's going up to the central control unit on the front of the J90 system cabinet. You want to route that right underneath here. There's an opening in the side of the cabinet. It's going to have to plug into the J1 connector. There's already a cable going up to the CCU from the J2 connector right here. We're going to be plugging this into J1, correct?
That's correct.
Okay. If you had additional I/O cabinets, you'd be running another CCU cable from this connector out into the second I/O cabinet that would be to the right of the system cabinet. Just going to put that in, tighten it down. Put the twist lock back in. And we'll slide the whole power module back in. This is really the only major disassembly that you're going to have to do during the installation. And as you can see, it's not too difficult. Are there any questions on anything up to this point? So what's our next step, Chris?
Okay, the next step is to use a small common screwdriver to slide the battery alarm switch on the rear of the CCU to the position 1, enabled.
I think you better do that, Chris.
Oh, okay.
I don't have a stool around to get up there.
The vertically challenged.
Yeah. There's your battery switch right there. It should ship in the off position. Chris is just sliding it over towards 1 so that it's on. If that switch is in the on position when you receive the J90 cabinet, chances are your battery backup in the CCU is going to be discharged. It's not a problem. You just turn on the switch, and as soon as you turn on the power, the batteries will start charging again.
Okay, next step is connect the external alarm cable between the I/O bulkhead and the CCU.
Okay, here's our external alarm cable. And we're going to run that up through the top. Again, Chris, I think this is your job. That's going into connector J6
Yep.
on the back of the CCU.
Okay. Next up is locate the Y1 channels in the I/O cabinet and route them to the system cabinet.
Okay, we've got 2 Y1 channels on this system. quite a bit longer than the other one. They're not really standard Y1 cables. We're going to bring that through the opening here in the side of the system cabinet. Take up some of the slack here. And we're going to plug them into the processor modules. We have two processor modules in this system. This is processor 0. This is processor 1. You can see they're labeled up on the top here. Here's our Y1 connections. You can have up to 4 Y1 connections on each processor module. On this system, we've only got one Y1 connection for each processor module. This is where we're going to attach to. Now these cables right here, you can see the end of that. These are hippie style connectors. So these pins are real fragile, can be bent very easily. So it's a good idea. Take a look, make sure that they're straight and not bent, and then plug them in. And depending on what style of Y1 cable you have, they can be held in by retaining clips or by screws. We've got both styles on this machine. So there's our first Y1 cable, and here's our second. Check the pins on that. Okay. Now the next thing we need to do is tie these cables up. If you look up on the top here, on a normal production system, you're going to have a plate up here with some little loops that you can put tie wraps through. And this is the area where you want to be tying up your Y1 cables to take up the slack. Now we've just kind of improvised here because we didn't have enough parts to get a hold of this special plate. So we've just put some of these little 3M clips here with the sticky sided tape on both sides. We're going to put our tie wraps through there. Grab me a couple of tie wraps, Chris. Thank you. So right here we have 3 screws that are mounted in the I/O cabinet. I'm just going to take them out. And this is what's going to hold the 2 cabinets together once you slide them together. Okay.
Okay, attach the cabinets together.
Okay, we should be able to just roll these 2 cabinets together now. Okay, I didn't hear any crunching noises. I assume we did it correctly. Now you're going to have to insert these screws through the other side over here into the bowl hole. Now, one thing we've noticed is that these don't always line up correctly. We found that the easiest thing to do is just put a screwdriver up into there, or some handy-dandy tool. Just slide it over, kind of bend it over a little bit to get the holes to line up. As you tighten the screw, it should pull the cabinets together even further. You just do the same thing for the next 2 positions. And then the final position down here. Okay, 2 cabinets are secured. Here's our customer supplied Ethernet. And we're going to connect down to the bulkhead down here. It just screws in, doesn't have the little sliding holder that you've seen on most Ethernet connectors. It just screws into standoffs. Okay. Well, now we're going to proceed with the Spark 5 installation. You'll be receiving one of these as your system console. Pretty straightforward. I'm sure you've all installed a Sun workstation before. Just going to unpack the CPU and the keyboard, mouse pad, mouse. So what do we got to do here, Chris?
Well, it says plug the mouse into the keyboard jack, which you've already done, I believe. Connect
Yep.
the keyboard to the base unit by plugging the keyboard cable and the port at the back of the base unit.
Okay, so here's our keyboard port right here. Okay.
Let's go ahead and unpack the video monitor.
As you can see, it's a nice color workstation. They spared no expense.
Connect the free end of the video monitor cable to the right-hand S-bus connector at the rear base of the unit.
Okay.
And plug in the monitor power cord. And go ahead and plug in the base unit too right away.
Yep. So we got your 2 power cords here.
Next is install the private Ethernet connection to the system console.
Okay. Now we've already dragged the Ethernet cable between the system and the console. This is BNC thin net cable. Now notice that there's a terminator on one end. You want to make sure that this terminator is installed, otherwise you're going to have network problems when you connect to the J90. This goes on to the BNC connector right on the back of the Sun. Okay?
Okay, connect the other end to the I/O cabinet.
I'm going to roll around the back here. Here's the other end of our BNC cable. This is going to connect to the VME bulkhead. It's located right here. Now this is another area where this cabinet deviates from a standard J90. On the J90 systems that you'll be seeing out in the field, this BNC connector will actually be located down here on this little bulkhead, right next to the customer Ethernet. So just be aware of that. You shouldn't get confused though, there's only one BNC connector on the back of this system. Okay.
Okay, next step would be to connect the console to the Ethernet network, customer network, if applicable.
Okay. Now here again, this is site dependent. Your customer may or may not provide this. We've had to attach an adapter onto this to adapt this Ethernet cable to the connector on the back of the Sun. You're going to want to be connecting it down here underneath the BNC. We can get a tight shot on that. There are two of these connectors down underneath the BNC. You want to use the bottom one. See this one up on the top? Don't use this connector. This is for a printer. You want to use the one on the bottom. Okay?
Okay, the next step, Matt, would be powering on the system console.
Okay, we got two power switches here. We got one on the back of the base unit. This is a momentary on and off switch. It's normally in a neutral position. So you just want to press it to on and then release it. You should hear a beep from the speaker. Now on the front of the workstation, there's also a switch on the monitor. Just want to press the monitor switch on. You should see something on the screen within about 30 seconds of powering up. Okay?
Okay, eventually you want to log in as Cray ADM once it's booted.
Before you get started doing this, you want to make sure that both of the cabinet AC breakers are off. There's one right here on the I/O cabinet. There's also another one over here on the system cabinet, which happens to be in the on position. Good thing we checked. So now I'll lift up the floor tile here. We'll hook up the power drops. Plug them in and put the locking cap on. Whoops. Helps to feed it through the hole first. Thank you. I'm doing my best here. There we go. Okay, now we got power on the system cabinet. Drop the cable down here for the I/O cabinet. Okay. Now at this point, normally what you do is you bring the cabinet stabilizers down and level off the cabinet. This is what the front of the system cabinet looks like. This unit right here is called the pod. Those of you who've been through J90 class already recognize it, I'm sure. Open up the front of the system cabinet by pressing on the handle at the top here. It's just a release button. Open up the front of the system cabinet door, and you should see the CCU control panel right here. We just want to check these switches, make sure that they're all set correctly. We got 3.3 volts, 5 volts. Those should both be set in the nominal position. These are margin switches, so they allow you to go plus or minus 5% on the voltage margins. Next, we have 3.3 volt and 5 volt enable disable switches. We want this in the enabled position. This next switch for 48 volts DC, we want that into enable. The alarm switch, that should be enabled. And we have an option of either being in local or remote mode here. We want to be in local. As of this moment, the remote option is disabled on the CCU. And I don't believe that systems are currently shipping with the remote feature enabled. So you may want to be aware of that. You probably won't be able to power up the cabinet normally if this switch is in the remote position.
Okay, in the I/O cabinet, you want to make sure that the VME and disk drives are set to not inhibit.
Okay, to open the I/O cabinet door the same way, pressing on the latch at the top. On this particular system, we've got one VME chassis. We don't want the voltage inhibited, so I've got the switch pressed up here. We have two disk drive drawers in this I/O cabinet. And the power switches are on both cases. So everything appears to be set correctly there. The sequence in which you need to power up is fairly important. You do need to power up the I/O cabinet first. You just turn on the AC breaker in the back. You should hear the fans come on. Next, we want to turn on the mainframe, the system cabinet.
Okay, the next step is pressing the CPU and VME reset buttons.
Now, if you can look at the front of the CCU panel here, here's where all of your alarm conditions are going to be indicated. So you can see all of the LEDs are off, so everything looks like it came up okay. Our system ready LED is illuminated. Now I'm going to press the reset buttons for the CPU and the VME. So now the system should go into reset. And if everything works okay, we should be able to connect to the iOS from the J90 console. And if we look at the console output from the J90, we can see that we're now at the boot prompt for the iOS.
Okay, next step is to enter load at the boot prompt.
So this should load up our iOS software. Now on this system we have the first load diagnostic package installed. So as the system is coming up, we should see the diagnostics, including the J90 boundary scan, load up and run. And hopefully everything has been configured correctly at the factory, so when you do this, you shouldn't have to bring up the J90 install tool to configure anything. It should be shipped that way from Stucco. Notice at this point we're already running the IOBB test. In the meantime, during the break, we were able to get Unicos to boot up. Hooray.